Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well. My name is Harsha, and I would be the moderator for today's exciting event. I would like to thank you all for taking out the time to attend the EdTech Power Hour series, a session hosted by Harbinger. For those who are joining us for the first time, Power Hour is the series of interactive roundtable discussions amongst the industry stalwarts, where they would be sharing their ideas, experiences, and insights on a particular topic. So the today's discussion topic would be, do we need more apprenticeship programs for bridging the skill gap? Before we begin, just a few housekeeping tips. In case you cannot hear the audio, ensure you have selected the right speaker for audio output. You may test the same to see if it is working fine from the audio setting option on the lower left corner of your screen. If necessary, dial in using a phone. With that, now it is the time for introduction. Our host for today's roundtable discussion is Rahul Singh. Rahul is a digital learning enthusiast and is passionate about helping organizations and leaders solve their challenges around learner engagement and student outcomes through intervention of learning technologies. In a career span of over 15 years in the digital learning space, he has helped a host of global organizations and educational institutions in implementing new initiatives around their digital learning strategies. We welcome you, Rahul, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Harsha. And thank you everyone for joining us for this panel discussion today. This is going to be a 45 minutes discussion. Sorry for the slight delay. There were some technical issues because of which we started a little late. And we want this to be an interactive session. So at any point of time, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, please feel free to type them in the chat box or in the Q&A session. So, all right. So with that, let me take this opportunity to talk through the game plan for today. What are we planning for today? So firstly, we are going to talk about the role of apprenticeship programs in bridging the skill gap. Then we will touch upon that, what does it take for an university or a community college to set up an apprenticeship program? What is the role that edtech companies can play in this domain? And last but not the least, how do we gauge the ROI? That's an interesting aspect that, setting up an apprenticeship program is one part of the game, but how do we measure the efficacy? How do we measure the ROI of that? And with that, let me take this opportunity to welcome our panelists for today. So we have our first panelist for today is Rich Richardson, President, Mississippi CodeWorks Incorporated. Thank you very much, Rich, for taking the time out to be on this panel discussion with us.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to join.
Thank you. Rich, for the audience, it would be wonderful if you could please share some of your something about you in terms of who you are as an individual, what you have been doing, and what this organization is into. It would be interesting to know all that.
Certainly. Well, my father was a military officer, so I grew up in a lot of different places. I spent about 25 years as an investment banker, mostly in New York, and then 10 years in Washington, doing international private equity, pioneering the infrastructure private equity markets in Asia and Africa. For the past 20 years or so, I've been doing mostly startups. For the past 5 years, Mississippi Coding Academy, which we started in 2017. That's been quite an adventure. It's my first intentionally nonprofit startup, but the for-profit skills transferred very nicely into the for-profit skills transferred very nicely into the nonprofit.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so very much. And we are so glad to have you on this panel discussion. Moving ahead, our second panelist for today is William Durham. But incidentally, William is having some technical issues in joining us on the panel. So let's see if he can join in. We'll ask him questions, or else we'll continue this conversation with Rich. Right. So setting up the context, I just wanted to kind of bring up this research report. So it says that in the last decade, the growth in new apprentices have been 70%. That's a huge growth, considering the fact that 2020 year was the pandemic year, And if you see in the graph, there is a dip in terms of new apprenticeship programs or roles that were that came up in 2020, but still overall in the decade, the progress is great. So there's no denying of this particular fact that there's a lot of apprenticeship programs that are happening. But we want to understand today in terms of, are they really effective in solving specific challenges, and what are some of those challenges that we are trying to solve through these programs? And this is where our first question, Rich, is can apprenticeship programs can shorten the skill gap? Is this a myth or is there some substance to it?
Well, our experience at the Coding Academy, where we've trained 100 coders, is that it's real. I should add that we have what I call, there's three kinds of apprenticeship programs. We have an informal apprenticeship program. It's not a registered apprenticeship program or an industry recognized apprenticeship program. We're exploring that aggressively to formalize it. But we've trained 80 coders in 4 years. We've got about 90 in training now. And those are people that were recent high school graduates for the most part, not in college, mostly in minimum wage jobs. And we converted, we showed them how to become full stack computer programmers, front end, back end, database, MVC. And mostly they went from minimum wage jobs to 35 to 40,000 a year in Mississippi. If you're in double that if you're in a tech, in one of the higher cost of living states. And they can have a career that gets them to 70 grand, 80 grand average in Mississippi. And our plan with CodeWorks and continuing professional education after the end of the 11-month program is to take them up to senior DevOps engineers badged by Amazon and do very sophisticated cloud work. That's 150 grand a year program, certification, even in Mississippi. So we'd say it's real, but it's industry and location specific.
Right. That's really wonderful. And I'll come back to you, Rich, in a moment. And please allow me to take this moment to welcome Willie Jones. Hi, good morning, Willie. Thank you for joining us on this discussion.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me in this discussion.
So yeah, and Willie, for the audience, if you could please share a little bit about yourself in terms of who you are, what you do, that would be helpful.
Sure, wonderful. My name's Willie Jones, and I'm president and CEO of DSC Training Academy and DSC Workforce Development Center. I'm also the director of Mississippi Coding Academy, Jackson. What we do here at DSC Workforce Development Center, we put people in jobs in transportation, construction, and now with this partnership with Mississippi Coding Academy in tech. So that's what we do here in Jackson.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so very much once again. And we'll have some specific questions for you. We'll like to pick your brains on this topic. But Rich, coming back to your point, I think that was a very crisp answer that you gave. And there were so many interesting things in that short answer that you spoke about. Full stack developer. I mean, if you ask anyone today in the tech industry, the biggest pain area, the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges that they're facing is the entire thing around or the mystery around the full stack developer. What is actually a full stack developer? Or more than that, people know what is a full stack developer, but how do you actually make a full stack developer? So that's one part of it. So that's a big problem area that looks like you are solving there. The second one is the economic mobility part that you spoke about. Helping college graduates, if I heard you correctly, helping college graduates move away from minimum wage jobs to a job like a 70K, 80K kind of job. That's economic mobility. And that's what we have been talking all these ages, that, everything done and dusted, the education is supposed to cater to the various sections of the society and help them through the economic mobility. We'll get to the nitty-gritties of that later in terms of what magic recipe or what magic sauce do you have to get this done. But it's interesting to know that there is a proof to the pudding, that apprenticeship programs are not a myth. There is a substance to it. But you also pointed out that what is being done at what area? For example, in an area like yours, in the Mississippi State area, tech might have more prominence than some other industry or some other industry domain. So that's one key thing to consider. Moving ahead to the next question is that, and I know this can be a very vague question. It's a very broad-ended question, but Willie, probably I'll request you to share some of your thoughts on this in terms of if, let's say, if an organization wants to go ahead and set up an enterprise, set up a apprenticeship program to shorten their skill gap or to support their talent needs and all those things, what does it take? I mean, what are the different cost variables, and is it like too much of an uphill task, or there is a set process, standards that you can follow and get it done? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, we've worked with a couple apprenticeship programs, and the apprenticeship programs that's through the Department of Labor, I find that seems to have a clearer pathway, especially for employers. The access entry point and doing the paperwork, getting up and going seem to be much more effective with businesses. We know right now in the midst of pandemic, businesses has challenges and limited staff. So trying to do a whole lot of paperwork, try to create the job descriptions, set all that stuff in motion is a challenge for individuals. Now I find that the programs that's more on a local level is probably the entry point is a little bit more time prohibitive, and also the length of time, it seems to be open-ended when you can start and when you can begin. But right now where we are, and you mentioned individuals that are graduating from college that are looking for higher paying jobs. Apprenticeship programs, I think, is just one of those glowing solutions that's standing out there for employers. Right now, it provides the additional funding around helping them pay for the wages. So that helps with cost structure for the program. And then right now, just looking for great people who have talents, just like our coders at Mississippi Coding Academy. They come with a lot of different skills and talents, but to have that coding experience, what a lot of businesses need right now, is great. And the apprenticeship program, also during the training process, provides some wages for those individuals while they go through the process. I think that's probably the number one thing that is wonderful for the individuals going through the program and for those employers who are looking to hire them, especially when we talk about women. Women, when, sometimes they have children, have other obligations, but if they have some income coming in during the training process, that helps a whole lot. And so apprenticeship programs, I think, is just going to be a wonderful wave of the future.
Thank you so much, Willie. Thank you so much. That was very interesting. I think the organizations who are grappling with the skill shortage challenge and all those things, they should be talking to their local area colleges, universities, and other education providers, and they could be. The beauty is that you can create a custom career pathway, which is specifically suited for an organization A or organization B. I mean, for example, tomorrow, if Amazon comes to Rich and says that, I need to create these are the skill sets that I need in my DevOps engineers, and I want them to be, in these particular states or particular locations. So that's a career pathway that can be defined. I think, Billy, the other point that you mentioned was, about, there was a story that I was reading about, some interesting apprenticeship stories that have helped, that have thrived across the United States. And one of them was about women, and particularly Chicago women in trade. Not sure if you've heard of that story or not.
Oh, they are just doing wonderful work. And there's several others in other parts of the country that are just doing the same thing. But what Chicago Women in Trades are doing is great. I'll actually be visiting them pretty soon. And when you look at the Department of Labor, they have a department called WANTO, WANTO, and their whole focus is to get women in non-traditional jobs. And if we want these, in their focus is if we can get more women in non-traditional jobs where they're higher paying wages, you transform the quality of life for women and families. So they have devoted this entire department to just that. And one of the main tools that they use to accomplish this around the country is apprenticeship program, registered apprenticeship programs. And you use the word custom. I think that's what is exciting about apprenticeship programs, that you can customize it to your need, to the skill set that you're looking for, and to the population that you want to serve and empower. So yeah, I just love what they're doing. And Chicago Women in Trades has been working with Department of Labor in that department for several years. And they're one organization that's really doing it right.
That's great, and that's a great shout out for the organization Chicago Women in Trade, and it's great. I mean, at the end of the day, definitely they are doing some great stuff out there. Rich, we wanted to come back to you, and so see, we understood that apprenticeship programs, there's substance to it. It can help us shorten the skill gap. The advantages, if someone has to go about implementing it, there's a certain structure, set process. It's not that you have to reinvent the wheel. You can leverage the existing infrastructure or the methodologies to start an apprenticeship program. So Rich, my question was that I wanted to get some of your thoughts in terms of what are some of the measurable benefits through which we can gauge the ROI of these programs?
A very interesting question, because I found myself telling people that going from a for-profit startup to a nonprofit startup, instead of maximizing shareholder value, I maximize human capital. And after we graduated a couple classes, I sat down and decided to see if we could measure it. So I came up with a measure I call return on investment in human capital. And what we did is, over a 5-year period, we took the increase in wage coming out of our program for the percentage of people that were employed, not every graduate, and we measured the increase in wages. We assumed they'd stayed on the track and progressed up to the average wage over 5 years, about 70 grand in Mississippi. And we took that difference and totaled it and divided it by the investment in each coder. We also tried to calculate, so we calculated 3 things: the increase in income, and then the likely increase in GDP, using either a 2 multiplier, which is what you use for non-tech industries, or a 5 multiplier, which is what you use in tech industry. We found that the return on invested capital was 10 to 30 times over 5 years with no terminal value. So that's a very specific quantified measurement. Has a lot of assumptions in it, but it leaves out things like assuming they become the senior DevOps engineer that at the 150. We didn't estimate that. If somebody went to college after our program, and we had one person who dropped out of college, finished our program, and then got a full ride to Dillard University in New Orleans, we didn't include them. So it's probably a pretty conservative number. Now that's the tangible. The intangible is most of our people in our day program, which is Monday to Friday, 9 to 3:30, are minimum wage workers, and there was no future visible for them other than minimum wage work. They now have a career. They don't have a job, they have a career. Their friends have seen them do something that nobody thought they could do. Their entire community has seen that. And the ripple impact is awesome. And we're 70% African American, 30% female, but now that Willie's joined, we're up to 50% female. So Willie, you might address the impact on the community.
It's huge, and I'm glad you mentioned the woman piece. I always tell people when you empower women, you're empowering the families and communities and your economy for where you are because of the many areas that women touch. And so these types of programs, apprenticeship programs, and then of course our whole program at Mississippi Coding Academy empowers that particular area. And when we can add services like apprenticeship programs to the equation, then you're going to have the capacity of the individuals that you're going to be able to serve expands. The quality of the training for the particular coder or particular participant is going to be better because she or he is going to be able to focus on the training and not have to deal with all of those outside challenges they may have around employment. And so the employer ends up getting a better quality individual. And so when you talk about rate of return or rate of investment, rate of the return on your investment, you're investing in a much better output. You got more individuals that's going to be retained in the program because of apprenticeship programs, and you're going to have a better quality individual because they're going to be very focused and they're going to get everything they need during that training process to come out. And that's why I'm extremely excited about apprenticeship programs and what they do, and especially about this conversation around it. So it must be on the rise here on the national level. And one of the questions I asked while you were off, I wanted to ask to our moderator is, how much are we using apprenticeship programs on a national level for these types of skill levels that we're talking about today?
Absolutely, Willie, and that's a very valid point in terms of how much are we using it at a national level. Before this panel discussion started, Rich and I were just having a quick conversation, and I was sharing my thoughts that community colleges had played a very important role in the advancement of employment and industrial revolution and all those other things. In fact, if I have to stick my neck out and say, probably one of the reasons why community colleges were set up was to support the employment and drive the industrialization. But at a certain point of time, I think, and it happens with everything, after a certain point of time, it needs a little bit of course correction, a little bit of modernization. Probably, in my opinion, this is the time right now wherein we need to go back and look at, right from the policymakers to the actual implementation on the ground, is that we need to actually relook at the situation and say that, these are the 5 things that needs to be done differently. The collaboration between the industry and the academia has to be much more. Earlier, it was simple. We need draftsmen, right? So you go to this particular community college or you enroll for this particular program and you get skilled and you get on the production floor. But now it's different, right? Now it's like, even if you get a full stack developer, that full stack developer should have an emotional intelligence skill set or a critical thinking ability skill set. So how do we get all those things into picture in terms of the communication between, my opinion, the communication between industry and academia has to be more transparent, and defining the career pathways together, which prepares the next generation workforce. It's very cliche term, next generation workforce and all those things, but it's true. I mean, it's true. Rich, what do you think around that? Would you agree, disagree to that?
I would go to the point that I'm in essential agreement. Community colleges are tremendously important. I will say this about coding and software development. It's such a rapidly moving, fluid field, and it's very attractive to people that often don't thrive in large organizations, that a more workplace-like environment is going to train a segment of the people that probably wouldn't thrive in a classroom. Coding itself, for instance, it's a learn by doing subject. It's a kind of mental exercise, and you need to spend several hours at it at a time in the same way you do writing to be effective at it. So we will change our program, for instance, in 30 minutes. There was a, in the first year of our program, the instructors, we had 2 instructors for the class. Both of them had to be out, and they gave me the class for an hour. Now, I'm not a classroom instructor. If you like anything else to do, I just said, okay, how are we doing? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What should we do differently? And the coders very quickly said, they're maybe 3-4 months into the 11-month program at this point. We want homework. We want computers we can take home. And we don't like the book you're using. This is the book we'd like to use. When the instructors came back at the end of the hour, I gave them that information, and we made those 3 changes instantly. That's very hard to do in an academic institution. Our instructors are not generally certified to teach in community colleges. They're industry coders, therefore they know the new modern languages, which if you work at a big company, you'll be dealing with their legacy languages. We've actually had some of our people get hired to do 60s vintage programs because they were still being used on the computers. We had taught people the principles, and we taught them a language. So programming in RPG was something they could pick up very quickly.
I also believe that when we talk about what the community colleges are doing and versus an institution like Mississippi Coding Academy, is that the Coding Academy has a clear pathway to jobs. And with the community college, they've always been great with the curriculum, but they have not been the real winners in really making sure that that individual, once they graduate from that program, know that they graduate on Friday, they're back there at work on Monday. And that's what young people are looking for. And that's what people right now in general, post-COVID, is looking for. They want to make sure that if I invest 11 months in a program like Mississippi Coding Academy, at the end of 11 months, when I graduate on that day, I'm to work the next week. And that's what the focus and goal is for the Coding Academy. And I think what community colleges are missing is that opportunity to partner with, like you stated, private industry for success. We can provide information to them to make them more successful in their programming efforts, because we are out here in the real world. We're working with those companies who need those qualified individuals. So I think that's where we are when we talk about the relationships with community colleges and even how they operate. Is we have to learn to work together in this space. And if community colleges want to continue to be successful as they move forward and make sure that they're utilizing their revenues and their training dollars effectively, that relationship has to change. They have to get look at being much more flexible in that particular part of their practices.
I might add that everybody talks about closer coordination between the academy and the workers, or the employers. An example of how we work intensely with them is 3 times a year, we bring in IT professionals and hiring managers, and our coders, every one of our coders presents their most recent project for 5 or 10 minutes, puts it on the screen, shows what it does, shows the code, shows how they solve the problem, and then discusses it with the IT managers. That happens 3 times a year at the end of every program. It's very much like a presentation in a corporation or in a Scrum team. So we'll spend usually takes 3 or 4 days to work through all the coders. It'll start at 9, it'll end at noon. The instructors and the director will typically have lunch with the IT professionals, and we'll discuss the coders, what their strengths, weaknesses were, how to change our program, what trends those folks see in the industry. So 3 times a year, we have that process. Now that's in addition to 30 or 40 times a year, having industry participants come in and talk about what they do, about their career. That gives an intensity of involvement that is not typical in many other places that coding is taught.
Thank you. That's a very interesting perspective. And in fact, that brings me to my next question in terms of how are you doing things at the Coding Academy? Of course, we are not asking for the secret sauce, but in terms of how do you go about doing this? And in particular, I'm a little more interested in knowing about, are you leveraging tech? Because, the face-to-face things not happening that much as it was happening earlier. And specifically when you have to, it's not it's not something like a compliance training or a leadership training that you can, run an e-learning program and make them sit through it, and they can come out of it clearing some assessments. So for, training people on coding activities, are you leveraging any kind of technology, and how are you going about this entire thing?
We're very high touch. Obviously, we need an internet connection, the development platform, the PCs. It's not magic tech. We do use it in a different way. Coding is something. Teaching coding is something that a lot of people have done. They've done a lot of different ways. The big tech companies that have come through say we're doing it differently than anybody they found. That's because we run a simulated business, and it's an 11-month program, and it's full-time. Our coders learn coding by coding. They learn soft skills by living the soft skills. So of that face time, it's only 70% of it approximately is coding. Only 30% of it is an instructor describing how something is done. In March of 2020, we went virtual almost without noticing it. One Monday, I told our guys we better plan for it, and that Sunday they pulled the string and we went virtual. Because of streaming, that was a seamless transition. Most of the kids, even though they were low income, had internet, so they had access. What we have done to leverage the real scarce resource is the senior instructor, the person that's been coding for at least 5 years and really knows how to teach. It's not enough. Just because you're a good coder doesn't mean you can teach other people how to code. In fact, the stars, the people that found the computer, somebody showed them the on switch and the rest was history, they often aren't the best teachers. Sometimes they are, but it's not highly correlated. What we have done is we'll take a senior instructor and we'll tie in remote scrum rooms, classrooms, with maybe 5 or 10 people. There'll be the main classroom, but in each of those remote classrooms, we have a junior instructor. So we have the human touch, so that if somebody hits a coding problem that they can't find their way around, there's a human there to answer the question. That's the weakness of online learning often, that you don't get that human feedback if you hit a puzzle. That can be very frustrating, especially for people that come from a background that doesn't produce a lot of coders. So we use technology that way, but it's, sometimes the best thing is a very human application of technology. And that's sort of what we have. I think one of the things that we do differently is, particularly in the day program, there's always an instructor with you for over-the-shoulder coaching. That makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, Rich, and thank you for that. I'll keep that phrase with me for some time. Learn coding by coding. So that's very interesting, and thank you very much for sharing that. So, and you rightly said, I think in your type of business, it's a high-touch business, but the interaction between the human aspect of it and the technology aspect of it has to be in the right blend, right mode. So we are coming towards the closure of the discussion. Really, I mean, there are a lot of these edtech startups, with this edtech boom that we are seeing. A lot of organizations are wanting to, the intent is there. They're wanting to go out, help people, help minimum wage workers move to a better life, better living standards, economic mobility, getting women, equal pay, equal share with their jobs, solving the skill shortage and all those things. But I mean, what are some of the things that you've experienced since you have been in this domain and you have been working? what are the life lessons, I would say, if there are any, that you would like to pass on to these aspiring 30 below 30 EdTech startup founders to think about?
I think we, especially when you think of women and even communities of color, is that the numbers are still very, very small when it comes to participation in the tech industry. And that's a nationwide issue. So you got to address first the change of mindset around tech. You know, we're still in the single digits, I think, nationwide when we talk about participation. And I think that's the same in community colors as a whole, maybe a little bit more. So we have to, so those organizations who want to use this as a vehicle to empower communities of colors or minorities, or just helping people in general, we got to think about the mindset change around that. So that means an education piece on connecting the opportunity to their pocketbooks, you know, and so that's required first. You got to do that work up front. And then when you talk about women, is you're going to have to provide some supports. We need more women in tech. And not only because there's just a need for tech, you know, in general, but we need women to be in industries where you have such low participation rates. Mm-hmm. And we know that also tech provides that higher salaries, the benefits that women need, all of those things. So we need to do the work to make sure that we have more women to the tech table and in training programs or apprenticeship programs and all of that stuff. But you got to do the groundwork because women in those communities that you're going to serve, they'll get discouraged pretty quickly. And you don't want them dropping out programs. You think about a program like Mississippi Coding Academy, where 100% of the cost of the tuition is paid for the participants. You want retention. You want to see retention. And it's an 11-month program. You think, well, hey, 11 month is not that big, you know, I mean, long, you got people who going 4 years to get these types of jobs. But for the average individual, especially women, that 11 months is a long period of time. So you need to provide those supports and those wraparound services to help with that process. So I think that's the biggest thing. But I think when those individuals get into the program and you get them going, it's really a great opportunity, because you talk about the analytical skills that comes with coding and other programs in tech, but specifically coding, it really adds value to the individual. It really adds value to the workforce. And so it's worth the effort. And that's why I'm excited about Mississippi Coding Academy and what it's doing and what it plans to do moving forward. It's good for Mississippi, it's good for our country, it's good for communities, it's good for women. It is just really good, because we're moving to where everything is revolving around tech. And so everybody needs to be included in that process. We need the real diversity in tech. And that includes male, female, communities of color. And but we have to do the foundation work to make that happen. So we have real sustainability. We're not wasting our resources, and that we're maximizing our resources that we have in play.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good message to everyone listening out there. And thank you very much. The tech has to be more inclusive. There's a lot of room for tech to be more inclusive there. So once again, Rich and Willie, I really wanted to thank you for taking the time out for this and these wonderful thoughts that you shared. And we really wanted to congratulate you on the great stuff, great work that you are doing with the Coding Academy. And, you know, I think in spite of some of those technical glitches that we faced, I think we did have a decent conversation. Sometimes the technology cannot be on your side, but yeah, it's okay. It was a very insightful conversation. Rich, Willie, I would certainly request you to share your email IDs or anything else that you want to share in the chat box. Definitely, I think this is probably one of many conversations that we would like to have. And maybe we can There's so much to talk in this area that we could probably have a sequel to this, and we could have another conversation on this. Once again, before handing it over to Harsha for closing this out, I really wanted to thank both of you to take the time out for this conversation. It was really very insightful. And congratulations once again on all the good work that the Coding Academy is doing.
Thank you. It's a joy.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us join.
Thank you. Harsha, over to you to wrap the session, today's session up.
Sure. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you so much. And before I just conclude by having few words about the group, I must thank Willie to talk about the women in need. So I would not say only the equality here. She mentioned that treat everyone equally. It can be a substance or non-living as well. That's a concept of equanimity. And I'm happy that you mentioned that this 11th-month program is equally important for the women who are struggling and who have talent, and they can compete with anyone into the industry, where I would say that this pandemic actually gave the point that while everyone is sitting home and doing their job, then why not the women can do it. So this is one of the greatest point. I guess it's a blessing in curse that we have received via this pandemic, and people are receiving equal opportunities to talk about this. I'm very happy. Thank you so much, Rich and Willie, for sharing such beautiful thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Sure. So I'll quickly move on to our concluding ceremony today and quickly talk about Harbinger. So Harbinger is a global provider of software, product, and services established in the year 1990. So it's been more than 30 years we have been into the industry and serving clients across the globe, right from North America, Europe, UK, Asia, Pacific, and Middle East areas. Overall, as an organization of 800 plus employees and individuals spread across India and US. At a group level, we are 3 companies: Harbinger Systems, wherein we provide product engineering services, focusing on HR tech, health tech, and ed tech domains. Then we have Harbinger Knowledge Products, wherein we have products for the teaching and learning development professionals, to name a few: Raptivity, which is a rapid interactivity builder tool. Then we have Quillions, that is an AI-enabled assessment generation tool. This one of the unique platform that Harbinger has. Then we have Harbinger Interactive Learning, which is the content custom content development wing of Harbinger, focusing on e-learning development, content transformation, and modernization services. So in a nutshell, this is about Harbinger Group. If you like to have more information or have any question for us, please feel free to drop in a line over chat and Q&A tab. All right, so nothing much. We'll see if we have any questions. We'll share with the panelists for you guys. And if you have any other questions, you can drop us on the email IDs that we have shared over the presentation. Along with that, I'll quickly conclude by thanking you all. Thank you, Rahul, and to our panelists, Rich and Willie, for such a wonderful discussion. I'm sure we all are going with some food for thought. And for me, today is the biggest line for 2, that is coding by coding, learn coding by coding. And the second is women in tech. So looking forward to these 2 things to take ahead and have a deep dive towards it. And thank you so much for the wonderful day. And I would like to thank our viewers and attendees who have joined us through Zoom and LinkedIn. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Meanwhile, over the presentation, we have shared the Harbinger Group IDs. Our panelists have also shared their email IDs and details about the website, so that you can go ahead, have the details ready for you and ask your questions. Thank you so much once again, and take care. Have a great one. Thank you so much.